Hey there everyone, I'm about to start doing a bunch of top 10 videos where we look at the top 10 monsters under different categories, and to start that off I thought we'd do something a bit more fun that is inspired because earlier this year we got a few mythics in a row that were like really bad, and it really made me think, oh, wouldn't it be fun to do a top 10 worst monsters list, having a look at some of the worst monsters that have ever come out. Now, yeah, let's get to the criteria. For this criteria, I decided to discount 0 to 5 star monsters, no super epics or below, because a bunch of them are obviously like the starting monsters in the game. They're obviously, not worth putting on this list. Super epics as well. There are a bunch of them which not very good. It would just be full of super epics on this list. That it wouldn't be very fun. So I decided to exclude them completely, and I also decided I make it a mixture of legendaries and mythics. Because otherwise it would be all legendaries, probably, and I'd like to have some mythics on the list, so I make a mixture of that. And then for the actual criteria of what's made me select these monsters, the important bit here is it's the time of their release. Basically all the monsters on this list have been buffed since their release, and if I did the current worst monsters, we'd just be looking at the tier list, basically, the ones at the bottom of the tier list, and I'd much rather look, I thought it'd be more fun to have a little look at history of some monsters which, when they came out, were just absolutely terrible. Some of these monsters on this list you may be able to guess, a lot of them I bet you will not have guessed were actually terrible when they came out. So, also, two things here, not just power level. I also factored in some cases where the moveset just doesn't work very well at all, doesn't really do what it was designed to do, because there have been some cases of that. So with all that said, I managed to pick 10 monsters to put into this list. The format of this video is going to be very similar to what I'm going to be doing for the top 10 videos that are coming up. So if you have any pointers on, how I can improve it, then let me know. This one was a bit more complicated because I was trying to get pictures of old movesets and stuff, which I don't have all of them. But anyway, let's get into it at number 10. So number 10, we have Lime. This is one of the mythics that came out earlier this year that really inspired me to make this video. It's number 10, it's not the worst by any stretch, and basically this is a case of it being very clunky. So this monster does work, and it has since been buffed. The main thing that has been buffed is basically making it less clunky. So the really clunky bit of it was both unwanted reinforcement and unwanted equality have the same restriction, which was that you needed to have a bronze shell or super shell on your side of the battlefield, and for there not to be one in the enemy side of the battlefield. Now the thing is that unwanted equality is just a straight up better move. Unwanted reinforcement, putting one bronze shell next in their line, was not good enough. Even at 100 seconds, that was not good enough. Unwanted equality, killing an enemy of your choice and turning it into a bronze shell, that's just better, really. So, unwanted reinforcement was basically useless. Double counter-strike, it was like, the idea is you give them bronze shell, you then use that for double counter-strike, and if they had a bronze shell in their battlefield, then you couldn't use unwanted reinforcement or unwanted equality, so you were pretty much forced to use double counter-strike. Using that bronze shell to kill one other enemy, fine, but that's not strong enough for a mythic. And then unwanted conversion, you create a super shell, so you can turn the bronze shell, and this is the interesting thing, the entrance makes a bronze shell on your side of the field, and next in line for you, and next in line for them. So if their one enters, well then it locks two of your moves, because you can't use the unwanted moves, you have to basically do the double counter-strike. If your one enters, well then you can use the unwanted reinforcement or unwanted equality, which is fine, but not that brilliant because you've got a bronze shell on your side of the battlefield. And then you can also turn your bronze shell into a super shell, which to be honest Lime doesn't synergize with very well at all. She gets the stats buff, which is okay, but the super shell needs another plant on the battlefield in order to do union attack. Lime herself isn't a plant, so you need to kind of be using other plants as well to make that super shell really work properly, because otherwise you're using kind of two monsters on the battlefield to do what one monster can do, and Lime isn't even that great. This is just all round way too clunky and not strong enough in any way. They've made it a lot better by simply removing the restriction from unwanted reinforcement, so she can now set herself up better and doesn't rely so much on the unwanted conversion and also the double counter slash. It's a slower move than double counter strike, but it's, you know, it's better. But anyway, this monster on its release was just like one of those things that you look at and just like, who tried to design this, because it doesn't really work. It's like fine in practice, it will do things, but like not always. Some of the time you're just going to be looking at like, what on earth do I want to do with this monster? And this came out shortly after Lyra, who has way more powerful movesets, way fewer restrictions. Like it's just ridiculous. And kind of funny because, you know, lemon and lime. But anyway, I feel like, you know, it can't have been the same person who designed them. But let's move on to number 9. At number 9 we have Road Knight. Basically on the left here we got the current day moveset, and on the up on the right we've got the buff that came to it. So the buff was changing the Nullify and Pierce to Revenge Breaker. Revenge Breaker is just excellent move. Like, it's now fine, but when this monster came out it had Nullify and Pierce, which even with the attack boost plus did about 2,700 damage. So it two-shot things. Mythics, it needed to... Yeah, no, it two-shot Mythics. Without the attack boost, it's like three-shot things. Basically not a great move, and the fact that it nullifies Revenges is nice, but not good enough. So, with the Reproduce and Shield Ally being, again, underpowered or pretty useless moves, Union Attack was the only good move to use. And you can compare this to a bunch of other monsters in the game where it's just completely outclassed, like Idleigoch and Celeshine with the Link Fast Strike. It just doesn't really match up. Its good defense doesn't really do enough, and if it got repulsed, then you know you don't have the attack boost anymore. So then Nullifying Pierce becomes a 3-shot kill. So if they break your Union, then you're pretty much useless. It's a useless monster. So it relies really heavily on the Union attack. It wasn't powerful enough in so many ways. Moving on to number 8 now. We have Jawshank. Now this is a very old monster, and you may have seen this around in PvP. It gets used, but this is kind of one of those cases of the meta has changed, that this had the gimmick of Roaring Entrance, and that's pretty much all it had. So the thing it kind of gets used for nowadays is being a Roaring Entrance cannibalized monster, which can set up certain combos and stuff. Now those combos didn't really exist at the time this came out. This was basically designed to showcase Roaring Entrance and it to be some kind of like underpowered balanced sweeper. But getting to Bloodthirst is just so difficult because it doesn't really have any good way to do it. It can get one kill with a Cannibalize, but like I said, if you're not building for the combos, then having a monster to cannibalize is not reliable. So you can't really, you know, go for that so much. And then double Zealous Attack doesn't get kills well enough. So this just isn't very good. And ironically, this was actually used quite a bit when it first came out, because people overrated Roaring Entrance massively. They were like, this is just an automatic turn, it's amazing, when they're killing through your team you're going to get this coming in, it's going to do some damage with double Zealous Attack to things. But the reality is, the game's just more powerful than that. That Roaring Entrance is decent, but never actually that amazing, unless the monster can like really turn the tide in a battle. So Jawshank, super underpowered, really not good when it came out. It's used in combos today, it got a secret skill later, but when it came out it was really bad. Let's move on to number 7 now, which is Pandemonium. Now this one's a bit more complicated. Again, on the left we've got the modern day moveset, and then we've got the buff, the quite considerable buff in the top right. The gimmick of this is each of the moves has both a positive and a negative effect. It's also got a bunch of what would be killer weaknesses, but then got killer immunity. Now, currently, this is really, really good. And what makes this monster really good is mainly the exhausting sleep, because that is a guaranteed sleep. If you use this with any Purify monster, or you get it poisoned, then it can just continually put enemies to sleep. And the healing stun move is also excellent, having 5 uses on that to stun enemies. You can see there it's a 100-second move and it's 200-second stun. Basically, that's really good. But originally, it did not have that stuff. So the really crucial thing here is it had poison immunity originally. So that stopped it from being able to get poisoned, so it can just keep using exhausting sleep. So you still had the combo if you used it with Purify, but you know it limits it a bit. Blood Poison was just a bad move, giving up 40% of your HP, and like if you're going for this whole sleep thing, which is like the strongest way to use it, That doesn't synergize with blood poison, so that move is kind of dead. Healing stun was stunning by 150 seconds, and it's a 120-second move, and it was 3 uses, so that was a lot weaker. This monster it was weak, too weak all around. You could use it with the Purify and Sleeping, and that was basically the one thing that it could do. Some people seem to like some aspects of it, but like honestly, it wasn't that great. And the fact that it was tanky and didn't have any killer weaknesses was nice for the Sacrifice team turn, but because all the moves were like 120 or 150 seconds and it didn't have hold ground, people could pretty much just ignore it and then deal with it before they use the Sacrifice team turn, and that move alone is not good enough to like really carry it. So this monster was just kind of a bit too weak all round, and we saw that when it came to the buffing. They just buffed basically every move, made it all a lot better. Oh yeah, Sacrifice team turn as well, sorry, 200 seconds before it could be used rather than 100 seconds, which meant, this was just basically dead weight on the battlefield for 200 seconds, doing very little before it did the Sacrifice team turn. At number 6 we have another mythic. This is Huskagon. So Huskagon, this is a very clunky moveset. We've seen that with the mythics that I put on this list. Basically, they're not like necessarily underpowered to the point of being, useless monsters, but they're just way too clunky. So this, I've got quite a bit on screen here. On the left is the original moveset. Up in the top right is the buff. And then on the bottom right is the current moveset. I've got the current moveset there basically to show you what Show of Might does. You sacrifice a teammate, you then stun all enemies by 80 seconds, and put a random one to sleep. So what made this really clunky, and I talked about this at length on the forum and complained to the devs, and it's basically why it got buffed. So it would come in, it would stun enemies, had stunning entrance, not shocking entrance. By the time it got a turn, it couldn't time crush double anything really. Unless there was a stun absorber, nothing was stunned enough for you to actually kill anything, and time crush double was 200 seconds. So what could you do? Well, Raw Bloodgrave doesn't really do much, because you have to have something put to hold ground really to make that worth it. Vengeful Recovery, again, pretty useless. You could ally substitute Huskagon or another teammate, but that's not strong enough. I mean, stunning entrance is not really a good enough reason to pull this back and make it come in again. And then Show of Might, you couldn't actually use, because that had a restriction 100 seconds from the first turn. So what Huskagon could do on its first turn was pretty much nothing. It couldn't really do a lot, and if something happened to be stunned, so you could do Time Crush Double, fine. You do that move, you do Time Crush Double, but you got to wait 170 seconds, that's, with it at +9, before it gets another turn, and then you can Show of Might, or start sweeping with Raw Bloodgrave, or that kind of thing. If you go for the Raw Bloodgrave, it's 85 seconds because it's +9, so it doesn't actually pass the 100 seconds for the Show of Might. So this was just like all round so difficult to use. It didn't really do anything. It didn't do enough. And yeah, if it sat on the battlefield for long enough, then you could start doing things. But it's kind of like such a wasted moveset. And so they buffed it. As you can see, they made it shocking entrance, so now it sets itself up better. It can time crush double 160 seconds, so that's a better move. Show of Might is 100 seconds from the start of battle rather than its first turn, so that's a usable move. So now it can like chain stuns and get kills, and it's brilliant. It's one among the best mythics in the game. But when it came out, it was just like they didn't. I don't think they really thought properly about how it's going to function. They had this brilliant idea about how it's going to work, but then put on way too many restrictions to actually let it function. At number 5 we have Jingle Dragon, and this is where it really gets to like terrible monsters. Those ones before, they were kind of fine compared to these ones. Jingle Dragon, the moveset itself, you can see on the left here, this is the modern day moveset. That is actually the exact same moveset as it came out with all that time ago. This was the second Christmas of the game, it's just over a year, and this was one of the first monsters, it was in the set of 3 first monsters in the game to get secret skills. So this was really showcasing secret skills and what they can be, whether they can be these 1-second moves that do some big impact, and Second Wind sets up Dual Confidence Strike really nicely for that. Now the big things here is basically Dual Confidence Strike was way, way worse. So you can see the buff here that came at some point. Dual Confidence Strike used to be 200 seconds, and it was weaker damage. and it used to have a time lock where you couldn't use it for the first, like, it was 100 seconds from Jungle Dragon's first turn. So what happened was Jungle Dragon came in, and it got to its first turn. The only thing it can really do is accelerate team. So it does accelerate team. At the time, it used to reduce the seconds of the move at the same time as you doing accelerate. So it was just over 100 seconds. So it lined up quite nicely for you to then do dual confidence strike, which is 200 seconds, to try and kill 2 enemies. And if Jungle Dragon had been, hurt below 70%, you could heal it up with second wind to do that. And then on subsequent turns, you've got Devour to heal it up to do more dual confidence strike. But 200-second move, it has to come in. It's not particularly fast. Pass another 100 seconds because of Accelerate Team, and only then can it attack and do its move. And bear in mind, the big thing here that a lot of people would miss is that dual confidence strike and the confidence strike moves in general, they do extra damage when you're exactly 100%. That wasn't the case originally, so they did the lower damage. So when you're not 100%, and you'll probably know if you've used any confidence strike monsters, the damage is not that great. Well, that's the best that it got on Jungle Dragon, and not only that, you can see in the buff here, they slightly increased its damage, so it was even worse than that. So this didn't really kill anything. It had to pass about 150 seconds before it could actually attack, and then it attacked with a slow move that didn't do that much damage. I don't know what they were thinking. I remember there was a bit of excitement about this monster when it came out, and then it was just like, people realised, this isn't good. It doesn't kill things enough. And, in the time, things were slower and weaker, but even so, Jungle Dragon was absolutely terrible. So moving on to number 4. Now this one, you would not have guessed, because Aura Dragon, today, it is one of the best monsters in the game, especially for PvE. It's just like standing up there as amazing. I've got this shown, first of all, this is the current day moveset, just so that, we have we're on the same page, we know what we're talking about, and you can see the heal rear guard, it fully heals the last 4 monsters in the team. We've got the reincarnation as well, so whenever anything of your, whenever any teammate dies, it gets revived at the back on 1 HP. Most people know how this works, but yeah, that's the moveset today, and what it was originally was actually a throw monster. So if we look here, this is the original moveset, and you can see this is one of the buffs that happened to it, the major buff, up on the top right. So the original moveset was Throw. You can see they changed Stealth Teammate to Purify Mist. So originally it could just stealth one teammate, and as a throw monster, it's kind of weird. So it's an interesting one because it's like, as teammates die, they can get revived at the back of the team, and then you can choose, am I going to keep these monsters? Like, am I going to heal rear guard and make them be a viable monster at the back of the team, or am I going to use it as throw fodder for Aura Dragon or other throw monsters? Yeah, no, it's just not good. And that reincarnation odds that you see in this buff, 40% to 100%, it actually was originally 30%. So the chance of it was just super low. Like, it didn't really create throw fodder, and then if you're using this in a throw team, then it kind of has anti-synergy, because, like, we know nowadays, reincarnating those monsters is super powerful. Like, getting extra copies of monsters, when they have powerful entrances, revenges, that kind of stuff, it gets really, really good. So you can't build around that because the chance is too low, and also if you're using it in throw, well then you don't really want to throw those monsters, because the things that synergize with it, you don't want to throw. So it wasn't good in that way. You could just have it in there for value, but like, what's it really doing? Because if you're not throwing, you can't use that move. Stealth Teammate is the only thing you can use. And then Heal Rear Guard you use at a certain point after enough things have died, but that when 30% chance, like, how long is it going to take before 4 things get reincarnated? It's like losing 12 monsters or something ridiculous like that. It's not really going to happen. So this monster didn't really do anything, and they redesigned it later. Yeah, I said it's bad from here. Jungle Dragon was like really bad damage dealer. Aura Dragon was just like non-functional, really weak, not good, and then they buffed it to absolutely crazy. Also, you can see it didn't have a secret skill. This was before secret skills existed, so it didn't have the instant switch friend, and in fact the first time it got that, it was instant send back, which you can see in the buff here, which is kind of like, if something was put to hold ground, the idea was you then send it to the back of the team and then heal it up. Quite nice, but instant switch friend is a lot better, because then especially with a life flip teammate, life flip friend, you can, swap something in that's being reincarnated and then life flip it back up to 100% HP. Really good design. I loved how it went. It didn't need the reincarnation to 100%. I don't know why they did that. They should have kept it at like 50% or something like that, and it would have been a good monster. But they decided make it 100 and call it a day. So that's number 4, Aura Dragon. Moving on to number 3, we have Geomagnus. Now this is quite notoriously known. This was a really big deal in the community because basically it was really bad when it came out, and then they buffed it and they made it way too good because they didn't know what they were doing. I'll point out first as well, Aura Dragon up in the top, you can see there, that was the original buff from the 30% to 40%, just so you can believe me that it's there. But yeah, so Geomagnus, where they messed up was backstab. So we know nowadays backstab is really good for entrance control stuff, but the original moveset of this, it had no passives. It had backstab, which was 130 seconds, and Blood Fury and Element Eradicate. Now, Element Eradicate, if you don't know that move, is a single-use move that's like Element Massacre, but really weak. So it only really killed things if there was like all 4 monsters the same element. Bear in mind, when this came out, Link teams were not a thing. Link did not exist. There was no reason to play Link, so sometimes people would do it for fun, but like basically it wasn't a thing. So Element Eradicate was not a move you could actually really use, and so to charge the Blood Fury you had to do this backstab, which is 130 seconds. So we're looking at a kind of Jingle Dragon type scenario here, where this is a reasonable speed monster, and then when it gets a turn it can't do anything. Jingle Dragon could accelerate at least. This one can't accelerate. It has to kill a teammate and then wait until the next turn, and then it can Blood Fury. It didn't have stun immunity or any kind of helpful passives. It didn't have the setup that it has nowadays of the ally substitute to create something to kill off. So you were just having to put this in and hope or try and build around something to kill off to then charge that Blood Fury. I think what they're imagining was playing it with stun revenge monsters, so you'd just backstab a stun revenge monster, that would pass some of the time, then you get to the Blood Fury, and Blood Fury was a really good move back then, but this monster was just so underpowered. And then they made backstab 50 seconds, and then made a big mistake with that because it took over the meta, and then they weren't sure how to nerf it. They didn't want to nerf it because it was frustrating people, so they made backstab 60 seconds. But anyway, that's the story of that. Geomagnus, when it came out, was just absolutely terrible. Moving on to number 2, this is Utopian. Now, Utopian, this came out at the same time as Stratostrike. Just a little side note here. They came out in the same egg, and Stratostrike, if you don't know, is my favourite monster in the game. I absolutely adore it, and when I saw it, I loved it, and I was just crossing my fingers like, please do not get Utopian. Please get Stratostrike. I was so happy when I got Stratostrike, and I'm still happy to this day, but Utopian did get buffed heavily later on. So the moveset doesn't look like enormously different in the old days to the current days, but the difference is very, very important. So first thing to note, if you look right down at the bottom, this was a standard attack monster. Nowadays it's a full defense monster, so it's really tanky, but back then it wasn't tanky and it was really slow, which is never a good start. Then what we have is Overwatch, and which is a fine move. We have Saving Spell. This was exactly the same in the old days where you could, it was a 50-second heal anything to full health. And other than that, it only has Give Turn. Like, basically what this monster is a Give Turn monster and nothing else. So this came out around the time Overwatch first existed. They put in a few different monsters as Overwatch monsters, and this was one of the original ones, and they clearly didn't really know how to balance it properly. Maybe it was like kind of made with PvE in mind, where like the AI just spams hit all moves, so you just get extra turns randomly from Overwatch, but like doesn't really happen enough. So the idea here was that if your team got hit by something, then Utopian would get a turn and then could give turn to another teammate. And then it would, basically give extra turns to teammates. And Overwatch, if you can slip that in before then doing a give turn, then it gets hit and it does another give turn. So it speeds up the give turn very slightly. But like, give turn has a certain number of uses, which is why then it's got the 400-second Mega Bomb. So you can kind of see what they're doing. But in reality, we wouldn't use a monster just for give turn. Like, that's just not strong enough. Especially with the fact that it's not tanky enough that they can kill it off when they want. and it's really slow. Like, this is a properly slow give turn monster. That's just not strong enough on a legendary at all. What they did to buff this was they made the give turn healing give turn, which is an enormous deal, because then it can give turn to itself to heal itself up off whole ground before using Overwatch. That's just massive. They also gave it stun absorb, which Overwatch with stun absorb is nice because makes it difficult to kill that, especially when you can heal itself up and then do the Overwatch again. This became the top-notch stun absorber when they buffed it, but yeah, originally just so bad. And those little tweaks that they made to make it tanky, the healing give turn and the stun absorber, made it a very good monster. But originally it was just terrible, and people knew this as soon as it came out. They were all just like, there's no point using this monster. We may as well use an epic with give turn that also has stun immunity. Like, why would you use this? So before moving on to number 1, I want to do a few honourable mentions, or really dishonourable mentions in this case. So this is where I'm going to talk about a few super epics. I've got a few dishonourable mentions in this video. In the later top 10s, I'm not going to have so many, but I was discounting huge groups for this, so wanted to put in some super epics here. So first up we have Lunar Lord. This hasn't really changed much. We've got the modern moveset here on the left, and the only difference between that and the original one was it had Risky Heal rather than LM Healing. LM Healing is obviously a lot better. But the thing here is that the clone next, making something with 1 HP, is not that good. Like, it's way too easy to deal with. And I think they were too worried about the fact that it's got stealthy entrance. Like, the idea is it's got stealthy entrance, it comes in, the other ones are protecting, so it's difficult to kill the new one. But, like, it's not that awkward to deal with, and never was awkward to deal with. And the fact that, like, to heal the new ones as well, you have to risky heal was really bad, because it's like, you've got this one that's on full health, and it's like, I'm healing the other one so that I have 2 on full health. But then, oh, it died, so then I've got 1 on full health. Yeah, it wasn't good. It's really slow, so it can't, like, clone quickly. The cloning move is 130 seconds as well, so it's ages before it actually can protect focus. And then protect focus, it dies on 1 hit. Like, this doesn't do enough. It doesn't really do any damage, because it's only got a hit-all move. Just all-round bad super epic. And it's why we've got it from the island just now. Like, we all get it at the beginning of the game, because they realised it was bad. So the next one is Snow Hulk. Now this one is actually a brilliant monster now. Originally though, this was one of the notoriously bad super epics. And this here is the original moveset. So you can see it's got both Reckless Attack and Zealous Attack. Basically the same move. Zealous Attack is just a slightly more powerful one. And I think it's slightly slower. Reckless was like 130 seconds. The gimmick of this monster is Regenerate. So when it dies, it has a 50% chance of reviving. The big deal here is that originally Regenerate brought it back on 25% HP, and Desperate Strike needs to be 20% HP, so it didn't set up Desperate Strike. Now this was quite quickly changed, so that it came back on the 15% that we see nowadays, but originally what this monster did was just kind of Zealous Attack, Reckless Attack. If it happened to fall onto Desperate Strike range, then you could Desperate Strike, but otherwise you have to kind of rebuild, which is like it's like a healing move. It's like 100 seconds or something, and heal by about 1000 HP or something like that. So it could heal itself up a bit to then not die off to the recoil. But like, this is just basic hit an enemy, and then when it dies, there's a chance it might come back. But people only really killed it if it went on to Desperate Strike territory. And then, if it came back, well then it's not on Desperate Strike, so it's probably just going to kill itself off with the Rector's Attack or whatever. It was just really bad. Like, you need critical moves or some kind of synergy, and there's just no way you could do that with the original Snow Hulk. Dishonourable mention number 3, we have Ogre Master. This is the last super... well, anyway. Ogre Master, I hated this monster when it came out. Nowadays it's, again, good. They revamped it, they buffed it multiple times. But originally what this is a high-speed monster with Retribution, which is counterintuitive. So if you lose multiple monsters at the same time, and this enters and it was one of the first to come in, then it can have Retribution charged. If that's not the case, which usually they can see it coming, if it's going to be one of the first monsters that comes in when something dies, so they can purposely not charge Retribution with it. So it comes in, and what can it do? Well, it can hit a single target, hit all, or stealth teammate. That's not good enough. Coming in, doing stealth teammate, And the other really big deal here is that Retribution, if you didn't know, got massively buffed when Angel Lion came out, because they wanted it to be a one-shot on Angel Lion. Angel Lion was like a standard defense monster as well, so they like basically doubled the attack of Retribution. So Retribution didn't one-shot with Hoka Master, it was basically just a reasonable damage move. So you had a reasonable damage move, you got basic attacks, you know, hitting a single target or all, and you got stealth teammate. This monster was just really bad. Really, really bad. One of the worst super epics in the game. And lastly, I want to mention there is another super epic, which I don't have on here, which is Abyss Soldier Dez. I decided not to include it because it's not like a big deal and it takes time to explain the moveset. Basically, it's just really clunky because it's like got solo moves, but it likes to clone itself, and then it needs the solo to protect, which it has to kind of do both moves, and it just blocks itself. It's really bad in that way. So now we move on to a couple of dishonorable mentions for legendaries. Lava Onyx, the shiny version. This, technically, when it originally came out, it was a direct copy, so I don't know if it really fits my criteria properly, so I put it in here. The bad thing about this is, like, Team 10 monsters are fine, and it's a give turn monster, which is okay, not brilliant, but the really bad thing about this is that because it has team turn, you can't give turn to it. And one of the big ways of dealing with having stun absorbers where they get stunned out of play is you give turn to them. But this can't be give turn to. So if it gets stunned out of play, it's gone. And it does absolutely nothing other than absorbing stun then. So this is actually super weak to stun. And then, you know, the moveset is kind of fine but nothing special. So yeah, you can instant overwatch it. So then if it's stunned out of play, gets hit, it will get a turn. But like, they could one-shot it. You know, lots of things can kill stunned chrono monsters out of play that don't have hold ground. So yeah, it's just really bad design. I wish they did something more with this. But anyway, that's this monster. Next we have Yukihime. So this didn't quite make the list. I do actually like this monster, but basically when it first came out, it was way too slow with the moves. So you can see the buff here on the right, and the main thing here is that Frozen Heart was 160 seconds. To make one enemy have double TU for their moves just for the next turn, that is not a good trade-off. So Frozen Heart was just not very good. Fatal Sleep was a bit too slow, especially because it kills after 100 seconds, and then the move, even with like Yukihime plus 9, it's going to be 170 seconds. So it's doesn't line up particularly well. Much better with it being slightly faster. And then also A Dream of Snow, the secret skill, used to sacrifice Yukihime. So one of the big payoff things here is just not non-existent. Originally it was like you had to trade this monster to put an enemy to sleep forever, but there's counters to sleep, so they may just wake it up or whatever. It wasn't strong enough, it was too slow with stuff, not that great. So now we move to number 1, the worst monster in the game. Could you guess it? It was Valzarane. Valzarane is surprisingly popular, and as I make this video, it is currently on the restriction list for PvP. In the top restriction, it was one of the most popular monsters in the last couple of seasons. This is way better than it used to be. I would say it's not actually that strong nowadays, but yeah, originally it was really, really bad. So we mentioned earlier on Confident Strike for Jingle Dragon, that it was, it didn't have the condition that when you're at full health that it did extra damage. Also, it was just weaker in general. And this Confident Strike for Valzarane was 160 seconds. So what you're looking at is a slow monster, does have shield entrance, but a slow monster that doesn't do that much damage and can potentially be disabled by, you know, putting on low HP. They went really safe with Confident Strike in the original design. And this had single Poison Touch and Poison Drain, which, you know, didn't really do much damage at all. It healed, but not amazingly. This monster was just way too slow to do anything, and there was no payoff because Confident Strike was not strong enough. They buffed this massively later on, but before then it was just really, really bad, and it was, I think, fairly well known among like the competitive PvP crowd that Valzarane was just like not a good monster to use for any reason. It didn't support poison well enough. It had no payoff. So yeah, really, really bad. Anyway, that concludes it for this video. I hope you enjoyed having a look at some of this, learning some history about some of these monsters that are actually pretty decent today, but were really, really bad when they first came out. I hope you look forward to the top 10 series, which I'm going to be doing. There's going to be loads of videos for that, looking at them by element and by PvP, PvE, all that kind of stuff. So you've got that to look forward to. Yeah, I'll see you in one of those videos soon.